he's essentially doing Putin's work for him from inside NATO. And
Is
the
he?
rest of NATO is pretty fed up with it. Yes,
A NATO leader, albeit one who's been traditionally very shy about hastening up any conflict or any intervention with Russia. Hungary, he's one of the most right-leaning, some people call him far-right, but right-leaning members of NATO.
yes.
What is his business with Donald Trump?
Well, I would say not just shy, but plain defiant and obtuse. I mean, he's essentially doing Putin's work for him from inside NATO. And
Is he?
the rest of NATO is pretty fed up with it. Yes, he's finally agreed to allow the 50 billion euros that Europe has promised to help the Ukrainians, but that was only after really, really
Yeah.
hard pressure. He is trying to play both sides of the game. He's cozying up to the Russians simply because he thinks that actually they're probably going to win in Ukraine, and he's getting all kinds of concessions. I mean, he's got some sort of trade advantage, I think, from his relations with Russia. He's also trying to promote himself as a leader of European conservatism. He's sort of the symbol that a lot of the European right now come around and feel that he's their man. And of course, that's a natural link with Donald Trump. He's also quite cynically calculating that Trump will win, and that therefore Hungary will be in a good position for special treatment, and that all his quarrels with Brussels can be ignored because America will be on his side.
It's been described by a former Hungarian counterintelligence official, as the liberal international order being under very serious attack. She calls Orbán a foreign policy gambler. He's staked everything on the collapse of this order and is betting that if he commits himself in advance to the rising powers of the East, he'll be able to secure a more favourable position. The US will construct a port on the border into Gaza to get more aid into the territory by sea. Officials say it could take a number of weeks to build, but means Palestinians would receive hundreds of additional truckloads of assistance each day. Michael, let's come to you on this one. It is a pretty big intervention, really, from Joe Biden, and many accuse him of reacting to the fact that many voters in the United States are not pleased with his approach to the Israel-Gaza conflict and the US's assistance of Israel overall, and the failure to condemn, in some people's opinions, the actions of Israel to a greater extent. Does that matter if Joe Biden's using this for political advantage? Because the overall headline is that there will be a way to get more aid into Gaza.
Yes, that's what's important. I mean, that's what's urgent, and that's what should have happened already. I mean, there should have been much more effort to get trucks in, to bypass the obstacles, to stop people preventing aid going in, and I'm afraid there have been efforts really to block it. If it's done for political advantage, well, that's not quite the right reason, but it doesn't really matter as long as it gets done. And I think he has recognised that many people in the United States are deeply unhappy about the way this war is dragging on to the huge cost of the civilian population in Gaza.
Yeah, look, people have been texting in tonight, Susie, saying the US should do more. They should restrict the financial aid that they provide Israel, which, you know, would be a real break from the usual, from what usually happens between both those countries and the long-standing tradition of the US supporting Israel. It would open up another box of worms, effectively. What do you make of Joe Biden's move?
Well, there's a lot of blind faith here that when you deliver aid, that it therefore appears where you want it to go. Usually what it means is that the person delivering the aid is trying to make themselves look good in some way, which is why Joe Biden's doing this. He needs to do so. Unfortunately, and I think we've spoken about this before, Kate, I've been in those areas where aid gets delivered. I have seen what happens to it. And even when there is the UN on the ground and good organisation and control of aid when it arrives, it gets taken off the planes or wherever, it goes into a warehouse, and then someone opens the back door and it gets sold out the back. That happens all over the world because Del Boy is universal, and he comes up out of the woodwork when there's a profit to be made. And there is always a profit, whether it's the soldiers or the troops or the insurgents or the civilians or whoever else who's actually, or sometimes even some people who work for NGOs and so on in the area. They've all got a good reason to speculate in that market, and suddenly it becomes very fevered.
Yeah.
So there's two things at play here, and the other one is that Joe Biden is having to set up a port which he cannot control, as you guys there said, cannot control what's happening on the seashore when he sets that up. He cannot control who's taking the aid away, but he's having to set up a port and deliver the aid by sea because he cannot tell one of his main allies to let his guys in. And if you have lost control of your allies who you supply weapons and finances to, then I would suggest we're in a far stickier situation than Joe Biden really wants to admit.
Yeah, US troops will not be deployed to Gaza because that opens up another chapter entirely. Is Susie right? Is Joe Biden doing this because he's chickened out of all other moves?
Yes, Susie's absolutely right, and I wholeheartedly endorse everything she said. That's perfectly true. And unfortunately, it's also right that there is huge room for misuse and swindling and cheating and all that, which comes with it. It shouldn't be necessary to have to build this port. Anyway, it's going to take, they said, up to 3 weeks, which is really longer than many people can wait. They're eating animal feed as it is now, and they're warning of starvation. And Biden should have done something much earlier, and essentially, he should have made it clear to his allies in Israel, and he probably said this to Benny Gantz, one of the coalition members who was, Israeli coalition members who was in Washington recently, just do it. Just allow these aid trucks to get in. And that's what needs to be done. But if they're not allowing them in, well, this is a second best. I mean, it was also rather ridiculous that America was airdropping aid on Gaza. And you think, well, this is such an irony. They're airdropping aid at the same time they're providing the weapons that are dropping bombs at the same time.
Yes,
Which
yes.
which you're going to do?
Exactly. Okay. I'm going to move on to this to just talk about Donald Trump, because he's due to meet with the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, who's faced repeated criticism from the US government over democratic backsliding and his friendly relationship with the Kremlin. Is this a move by Donald Trump, Susie, on purpose? He's due to meet Viktor Orbán tomorrow. We're all talking about it now. The State of the Union address by Joe Biden is tonight. And tomorrow the focus will be back on Donald Trump.
Well, exactly. He'll take any kind of endorsement he can get from anybody. He will take any kind of headline he can get from anybody. And if that means cozying up to an authoritarian wrong'un, then he's quite happy to do that. If Donald Trump was in any way consistent, he would take the fact that he is, painting himself as an anti-Beijing hawk and question Viktor Orbán about his own links with the Chinese regime. He's not going to do that. He's just going to take the headlines and the attention and everything else that comes out of this. But it's kind of astonishing that a NATO member will go to the US and not actually speak to Joe Biden at any point.
Yeah, certainly. Michael, for you...
Thank God for Sweden.
Well, at least we've got some good news on Sweden today. So there you go.